Welcome to the Q Podcast.
Q is about conversation.
If we're really concerned about ending poverty, we've got to be more concerned about creating justice.
Our cultural products as Christians need to both defy and resonate with the culture.
And God's doing amazing things. His church is expanding. His church is growing.
It's not what's the purpose of my life, it's what is the purpose that's been assigned.
Stay curious, think well, advance good. This is Q.
Hi, this is Gabe Lyons. Welcome to another edition of the Q Podcast. We are so thrilled that you're with us today. This is a pretty exciting week for us at Q. We're launching something entirely new, and I want to tell you about it because I want you to be a part of it. But not only that, I want you to invite some other friends to be a part of it. It's happening tonight, June 14th. So if you're listening to this at a later date, you can actually go back and watch what I'm describing to you. I'm going to tell you the website, where it's at. But for us at Q, if you've been around the Q world for a while, you know we every April do an event, and we do this event called Q, where we have over 40 different talks delivered by leaders, experts, practitioners, people who are amazing and very smart at the kind of work that they're doing or the creative ways they're trying to solve problems in the world. They're people who think well, as our tagline for Q says. They're curious, but they also advance good. Well, later on in this podcast, you're going to actually hear one of the talks from this past April. But tonight, on June 14th, we're doing our first ever what we're calling Q&A. And these are going to happen throughout the entire summer of 2018. So I want you to be preparing for it and thinking about it. So many of you I know who listen to the podcast, some of you have been to the event, but some of you have not been able to actually come to the event. And so you sometimes miss out on some of the most fascinating talks, conversations, topics, controversial issues that start to arise when we're in the room together and we're having discussion and debating how do we move forward on some difficult issues. And so with the Q&A sessions, June, July, and August, once a month, we're going to release our top talk and topic that the audience that came to Q said to us after the fact, this was the most important talk and topic that I engaged while I was at Q. And so there's 3 different ones, and the first one, which starts tonight, is on the issue of reparations. Now, when you hear that word, sometimes I know it can bring up thoughts of a government sort of focused initiative to repay people who have suffered under certain issues and atrocities that government was in power while those things were happening. And specifically in America, it describes the idea of racial reconciliation, but moving beyond reconciliation to actually repairing. Now, at Q, what we wanted to address is, what does it look like for the church to imagine repairing some of the brokenness, some of the problems that have come in our country that maybe the church was a party to or maybe approved of in the moment? Maybe you, of course, alive today, you say, man, I didn't have much to do with the racial problems that many people experienced years ago. But today you're saying, I realize there's a problem. There's a healing that has to take place. And so at Q this year, we asked Duke Kwan, who's an amazing pastor of Grace Meridian Hill in Washington, D.C., to deliver a talk that would challenge us to think well about what does repair look like. We've had a lot of conversations in our culture about racial reconciliation, even repentance. But we don't always push to the next level of, well, how do we fix what has been broken? And could the church actually lead on that in a way our society and our government may not ever be able to lead on that? And so I think you'll find when you join in and listen to this talk and gather your friends around that you're not only going to hear the talk released for the first time, but you're also going to hear interaction. So we're having Duke Kwan as a part of this evening where I'm going to interrupt the talk a few times. I've got questions for him. I want him to expound on about some of the ideas he's laying out. But then we want to hear your questions. And so that's why we call it Q&A. For the first time, it's not only the question, but we want to hear a few answers from the presenter. And we also want to hear questions from you. And so you're going to be able to use social media to interact with us. It's going to be really fun. You can go watch this evening, as well as anytime you're listening to this after the fact at qideas.org/summer series. And so check in not only in June, we're going to also do this in July on the topic of gender equality. This was a key topic. We had a few talks around this at Q. And then in August, probably one of the most talked about and discussed conversations, because it was so surprising for so many people in attendance at Q, was a talk dealing with the issue of exorcism and demons. Now, when you hear that, I'm sure you go, wow, that sounds interesting. And what we did was we wanted to really address what's happening in our culture today. There's been a complete rise of exorcisms and a discussion about that. Major newspapers are talking about it. The New York Times was writing articles about the rise in exorcisms around the world. And so we wanted to invite in a Catholic expert, somebody whose entire life and career is dedicated to helping train priests to know how to deal with demons. Now, I know that probably makes the hair stand up on the back of your neck when you hear that, but wait till you hear this talk. Wait till you hear this interview I had with Adam Bly, who is the expert on demonology and exorcism for the Catholic Church. And he describes how he looks at his work, what they've learned over 2,000 years about the way demons function and operate. And it's going to be an eye-opening experience. And that will be taking place in August. So either way, I want you to bookmark qideas.org/summer series. We're going to have 3 of these evenings. Invite your church, invite your friends, your church staff, your organization to plan on these moments. It's going to be at 8 p.m. on Thursday evening, June 14th, and that'll be Eastern time. But again, you can come back and replay it after the fact, and let's begin the conversations that actually lead to change. Let's not let these talks just kind of live in some world where they just exist as a talk. The whole point of these talks that we commission is to really instigate and to mobilize and to move us as Christians to be a part of the solutions on some of these really difficult topics. And we need your voice. You'll see in this discussion about reparations, this talk, and then tonight as we talk with Duke about it, I think you'll find that we've got some good ideas there, but they're not fully formed. There's a lot of work that needs to be done that requires a community of people. You are that community. And as listeners to this podcast, we thank you for being a part of the solution to so many of the challenges facing our culture, facing our families, facing our industries. And you are that creative bunch that I believe imagines kind of a redemptive way to move forward on these topics. So thank you for that. For this episode, I'm excited to introduce you to Bianca Olthoff. Bianca's been someone that some of you've maybe heard before as just a fiery, just enthusiastic presenter who really loves people well and also loves God's Word. I've known Bianca and her husband Matt for many years, and they've been an amazing couple that cares so much about church planning. She's done work with A21 to fight sex trafficking, to help the immigration situation that was happening throughout Europe as refugees fled from the Middle East. She's just rolled up her sleeves, her and Matt, and been so involved in the church. And most recently, she's been very involved specifically with incarcerated women. And so we asked her to come to Q this year and to share with us really what she's seeing, what she's learning as she kind of goes on the inside of the bars in a prison and actually works with people who many would have said are cast out, are broken, are people who maybe it must feel hard for them to feel grace and be redeemed. And she actually opens our eyes to the amount of grace and joy that people in that setting also can feel. And so it reminded us of this question: does God form us in all circumstances? Her talk was called From the Broken Place, and the whole idea here is getting after what does it look like for God to use the things that have been broken in our lives or broken places that we feel like there's no hope, no opportunity for redemption, and to actually see God move. So let's listen in to Bianca Olthoff on From the Broken Place.
The first time I went to prison, I swore I would never go back. She looked at me outside of her cell and she said, I want my life to matter. I want to have purpose. Now, before you think I shanked someone with a shiv and served hard time in the pen, let me pop your Q bubble. I was invited to speak to a group of women at a Los Angeles prison at the ripe age of 26 years old. I had just finished graduate school and I was excited to give back to my community, to my hood. But had I known that at that moment, more than 11 million people will spend time incarcerated in prison this year alone, I might have been discouraged. I might have maybe even been dissuaded over the fact that 3 out of 4 inmates will be incarcerated yet again. I might have even been discouraged to discover that there are more colleges, there's more prisons and jails than there are universities and colleges. But uneducated and unaware of the audience that I would be speaking to, I was excited to speak to the sea of faces before me. Women with skin color like mine, women with histories like mine, women with crazy names like mine. We looked very similar. But there was something that I put up, a wall, if you will, to keep me safe and secure. These women, I thought, were not like me. But weren't we similar? See, our lives could have very well been the same. I could have been seated in a prison just like them, serving time in a pen just like them. And if statisticians were correct, then that could have been my lot in life. I'm a first-generation American. My father came to this country illegally. I was a recipient of donated clothes and donated food, academically illiterate and obese as a child. I was on track to complete the generational cycles of those living in the concrete jungles of Los Angeles. But our paths separated. We moved out of the hood. I graduated top of my class in high school and went on to college and graduate school on full academic scholarship. I was a Bill Gates Millennium Scholar, and there was something about this that separated our worlds. We were nothing alike. But standing before this sea of uninterested faces, some with tattoos on their neck telling me and my mama where we can go, y tu mama también, I speak Spanish, I know what you're telling me, okay? I was very excited and prepared to give a talk on succeeding and overcoming. By the time the talk was done, our guards went down because I gave a particular assignment. I passed out note cards and dull prison-approved golf pencils, and I gave them the assignment. What is the one thing that you want in life? I received two answers repeatedly. The first one was freedom, which shouldn't sound surprising, right? Like if you're in prison, who wouldn't want to be out of jail? But how they described and articulated freedom was something that was a little bit exciting and new. What they wanted was freedom from addiction, freedom to dream again, freedom to believe that their life could actually look different. And there I saw their humanity scratched on index cards with chicken scratch writing, hopes and dreams of freedom. We ended our time together, and as I was heading out, I saw a woman who had watched our gathering at a distance. A prison guard had come up to me as I was packing up my stuff to leave, and he says, "There's a woman that would like to speak to you before you leave." And as I was gathering my stuff, he looked at me and said, "She's on her way to death row. She's going to be executed within the next 2 weeks." When he told me this, I didn't have time to even process this. So when I went up to her and introduced myself, she said, "I heard what you said, and I wanted to tell you what I wanted for this moment in my life." She said, "I want purpose. I want my life to matter." A guard came over and quickly whisked me away because bed checks were about to start. I stood before an electronically bolted door. It opened up and I walked alone down an echoous, cavernous hallway with no windows and fluorescent lightings above. I came before a bulletproof glass window and I was handed my wallet, my keys, and my phone. And I walked to my car alone, thinking about the simple yet profound concept of what this woman wanted. She wanted her life to matter. It's what we all want, freedom and purpose. This event was so emotional and, dare I say, scary, that I swore I would never go to prison again. Fast forward a few years later, I find myself working for a global anti-human trafficking organization called A21. I oversaw global communications and the safety of our Orange County office. And while some people like Liam Neeson are called to free people and be freedom fighters and bust down brothel doors, I was called to use words to be a freedom writer. Well, that all changed the moment that I flew to Greece to visit one of our field offices. And there in our field offices, I was told that there was a woman who had been trafficked and was in prison, but no one could communicate with her because she only spoke Spanish. I was told that I was the translator, to which I said, "I watched novelas as a child, but I cannot speak Spanish like this." They immediately took me over to the detention center, and I walked into this detention center. I'll never forget the sights and the smells and what I had witnessed these men and women were going through who had been trafficked. A girl stood up with mocha-colored skin like mine, and as she came to the gates, I said, "Hola, Bianca, nosotros queremos ayudar. Hello, my name is Bianca, we want to help you." And she said, "Ayúdame, ayúdame, por favor." Years later, I stand before so many people and I'm realizing that these words of help me, please, are reminiscent not just of the woman who is living her life on death row, not just this woman who was incarcerated in Greece, but for many of us who are walking around with walls of imprisonment that we've erected for ourselves, lies and secrets that we keep hidden, eating disorders, credit card debt, porn, other addictions, and our soul is crying out, ayúdame, por favor. So what I proffer to you today is, will you speak freedom to those who are emotionally or physically incarcerated? The ironic lesson I learned in prison is that freedom begins the moment that you actually believe that you could be set free. When someone speaks to the shred of good within, when someone speaks to the potential laying dormant inside, it has the ability to change lives. I've seen it with my own eyes. The first step to freedom is believing that you can be set free. If you're living a life of freedom and purpose, will you give the keys of freedom to those who are begging for freedom, whether you believe they deserve it or not? Paul the Apostle in Galatians 5:1 says, "It is for freedom that Christ has set us free." If we are free, we have the moral duty and obligation to speak freedom to those who are struggling to break the bonds of oppression in our generation and the next. But how? Not all of us will go into prisons. Not all of us will work in anti-human trafficking organizations, but we all have the ability to look at someone and say, there is potential. God has a plan for you. If you are not dead, then God ain't done. Get back up. There is still reason and purpose for your life. You don't need to be the most educated. You don't need to be the most beautiful. You don't need to be the most influential or affluent. You don't need to be the richest. You don't need to be the prettiest. You need to be the most willing. The most willing to look at the debased of society, the dredges, the overlooked, and the undervalued and say, God has a plan for you. Tell them that they have potential. When the death row inmate looked at me and she said, I want my life to matter, I promised her that it would, because it did. For it is Jesus who said, when you know the truth, it is the truth that will set you free. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed listening to Bianca Olthoff deliver this great 9-minute talk. And we hope every week you'll just continue to tune in and invite people to listen to these moments of just inspiration, kind of a way of realigning yourself as you enter into the day or enter into the week, as you think about what is God up to, and you're encouraged by all the amazing people he's using. I thought just a couple of the questions and statements that Bianca made were really helpful. You know, freedom begins the moment that you actually believe that you could be set free. You know, so many people don't believe it's possible to change, don't believe they could ever experience transformation. They're believing the lie of the enemy, that they're stuck in their circumstances. And I think she's speaking to that. And for any of you listening today where that's what you're feeling bogged down, you're feeling like you've tried and tried and tried and failed and failed and failed, that what God wants you to know is that you can still be set free. And you have to believe it. And you have to believe in the one who sets people free to truly experience it. And so I hope this was encouraging to you. I hope you'll join us this evening on June 14th for Q&A, our summer series where you can hear some of our greatest talks and topics from this last year and start to engage in those with us and creatively be a part of creating solutions for those around us. So I'm Gabe Lyons, and I look forward to continuing the conversation.